Hello everyone, and welcome to Dice Dev. Now that the holiday season is over and I'm less busy, I'll be able to dedicate more time to making episodes. Hopefully on a regular schedule this time. Anyway, let's get started. D8 roll for format. Let's go. 4. Top down. Next is genre with a D12. 4 again. Fighter. Continuing on to presentation, D6. 5. Hand drawn. Oh boy. Let's move on to setting with a D10. 6. We're going to space. Now 2d20 for theme. Yet another 4, and nat 20, Dev's choice. So that's chase, and I'll go with capture for the second. Finally, d20 for restriction. 5. All characters are cats. Meow. Now it's planning time, and I'm going to call the game Mewdrops. In this game, the player is a space traveler visiting an alien planet. Their job is to capture little slime creatures called Mewdrops by picking them up and bringing them back to the teleporter at the center of the map. Mewdrops come in different colors, and the player will have a quota for each color, except for the red ones, which are aggressive and can hurt the player. Those, the player will have to punch to defend themselves. Oh, and all characters are cats, including the Mewdrops. I started with doing the art first. Since this will be hand-drawn, I'm using the tablet app I use for the plan segments. I've always said art is my weak point, but this time around I felt like I did a decent job. I owe part of that to the app's ease of use, of course, but I did get a sense of accomplishment with the final results. At no point during this was I daunted by the task. I was actually having fun, which is always a positive in game development. I was originally worried about putting hand-drawn on the list, since my past endeavors with arts have been less than stellar. But now I'm glad I did. This gave me a lot of valuable experience that I want to continue using. I hope to roll hand-drawn again soon. Anyway, while these shots of me coloring are going on, I wanted to talk briefly about updating the list over time. New elements should occasionally swap in for old ones, but I've thought about ways to get the audience more involved, and one idea is to make suggestions for the list in my Discord, or run polls there to see what could be added or removed. If you think this is a good idea, let me know in the comments or in the Discord. Also on a side note, I really like how I got the shading on these rocks to come out. Another thing, since I'm doing the art ahead of time, this means having to use placeholders less and using the actual art during development instead, which is also a plus. Now it's time to get the actual project underway. The player consists of a base object with other elements attached to it. The nested objects, such as the sprite object, are controlled by the root. These are then referenced inside the object, allowing access to them easily from inside the root object script. Then, when coding movement, like you see here, it won't be just the root object changing position. All the components will be carried with the root as it moves around. This is basic object-oriented programming knowledge, but I thought I'd share it anyway. The nice thing about this is you can have separate control over everything that goes on with the object, like how the shadow is separate from the main graphics. This will be important when I make the Mewdrops later on. Speaking of which, here I am starting the script for the Mewdrops. There are a lot of states and statuses to keep track of, which will all have to be carefully organized, which means it's scaffolding time. All of these placeholders will organize their movement and their behaviors, which I will fill in later. Organization is key for these kinds of things. Doing it now saves a lot of headaches in the future. I also know they will sometimes need to pick a direction at random, so I'm pre-writing a function to do this for me. Again, to save time later. As I mentioned before, the Mewdrops will have a lot of states. Idle movement, preparing to jump, the jump itself, and landing, just to name a few. All of these states and how they transition to other ones need to be carefully organized and controlled. This is where the scaffolding really helps. I already have the behaviors sorted out ahead of time. It's not super complex, mind you, but without some kind of structure, it can become easy to lose track of what still needs to be done. You'll appreciate the structure later. To check if the player or other Mewdrops are nearby, I added an area around each one that will index them if they get close enough. The function returns either the player or the nearest Mewdrop of the specified type. Here, I'm taking a break from the Mewdrops to get the player graphics sorted out. As I said before, I'm not much of an artist, so a 4-frame walk animation is plenty. Then, of course, the code needed to make sure the proper animations are playing. A lot like the wizard in the first episode, really, although the player has much more direct control here for more complex movement. Building the level itself is next, but it's pretty much going to be an open field full of rocks, so I just needed to scatter random rocks around. It'll have a slightly different layout each game, but shouldn't impact gameplay much. Going back to the Mewdrops, there's still a lot of ground to cover here. The nice thing about controlling the graphics separately is being able to move them separately as well. To simulate a jump, I just move the graphics up and back down, while the object location and its collider stay where the shadow is located. I'm pleased with the end result. But, as I said before, there will be different types of Mewdrops, each with their own behaviors and attributes. They will be scattered randomly at the start, with the aggressive red ones being the most common. That way the player spends time fighting them off while searching for their quotas. The colors determine behavior. Green avoid red, blue avoid the player, yellow gets scared when there's combat nearby. Only the red can be punched, however. I didn't want players accidentally punching Mewdrops they needed. I also implemented scripting to flicker the sprite once punched, simply setting the visibility to its opposite state rather than just toggle on and off. I would do this again when the player gets injured. Also, I didn't want the map to clear out of all the red Mewdrops. So, instead of despawning them after being punched, I decided instead to merely reposition them somewhere else. I would use the same repositioning script for captured Mewdrops, because I didn't want to frustrate the player by having them hunt rarer and rarer targets. This way, instead, the ratio of Mewdrops would remain consistent throughout the game. Sometimes it's better to sacrifice difficulty to ease frustration. With punching implemented, the fighter portion of the game was basically complete. It was time to focus now on the chase and capture. First, picking them up. Rather than having the player physically grab and carry the Mewdrops, I opted instead for holding them in a protective field, which frankly was easier to animate and align, but would still require a special effect for carrying. I also took the opportunity to script when the player gets hit, since it also drops whatever they're carrying. Naturally, getting hit would also reduce health, stun and knock back the player, and afford a few moments of invulnerability. There's no way to recover health, so after 5 hits, the game would be over. I'm saying all this like it isn't the most common video game mechanic of all time. It mostly worked on the first attempt, although there were slight issues with the player's invulnerability in facing. It was time to start rounding out the Mewdrop behavior. There was still quite a bit to go, and I also needed to complete their side of the carrying action. While their individual behaviors don't hugely impact the game, I still wanted there to be a slight flavor to their actions, just for fun. I also completed the special effects for Mewdrops being teleported. Working with particle systems has always been a fun part of game design for me. As usual, I add a simple script to delete the particles when they're finished playing. A simple but vital script for effects. Now the Mewdrops could be carried back to the teleporter pad and delivered. They're actually just being repositioned, like I mentioned before, but just pretend they're caught. The UI also needs to show the player their quotas, so that was next. Since this was a hand-drawn game, I avoided using text objects and instead made hand-drawn digits. The UI was set to update whenever a capture was made. The system worked well and did the job properly. And on the first try, too. With all that out of the way, the rest of the surrounding game structure was left. Starting and ending the game, the title screen and such. Now things were rapidly coming to a close. I put in a randomly colored Mewdrop to show which button was highlighted, just a fun addition. Since I was allowing the player to use either mouse and keyboard or controller, I had to change the selection behavior based on the last one that was used. It was a bit of a headache, but I got it working in the end. With this, the screen navigation was done and I could move on to the next step, audio. Because I spent so much time on everything else, I decided to go simple with the music this time, and just make a single loopable track. I'll try to make something more dynamic next time, since dynamic music is still my favorite type of music to write. Still, it's nice once in a while to just write a normal track, which I technically did last time as well. 2 tracks, that is. I'm really hoping to roll rhythm game one of these times. For sound effects, I put audio objects on the player and on each Mewdrop, which I could pass audio to in order to have it play when needed. Nothing strange here, just typical audio stream player behavior. Then, it was simply a matter of calling the sound functions when needed. These were the last features I had planned, but I decided to give the game another quick pass to see what else could be improved or expanded upon. I added a timer for those interested in speedrunning, though speedrunning a game full of RNG can be sketchy. Still, it's there if anyone feels like trying it, I mean. I also put in a few last-minute special effects, and almost forgot to add the beeps when selecting buttons. All good, though. Finally, a bit of tidying up the UI, and Mewdrops was complete. As usual, follow the link in the description if you want to try it yourself. This was enjoyable to make, and I hope everyone else enjoys it as well. Thanks for watching. Links to the game download and my Discord are in the description below. If you like this, feel free to leave comments or suggestions, and subscribe for future episodes. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.